Donald Trump did a bonkers interview with right-wing host Steve Bannon, where things went to a very bad place very, very quickly. We have multiple clips, of course, to look at from this. But we'll start off with Trump perpetuating a truly nuts conspiracy theory about COVID being an attempt by China to hurt his re-election bid. Wacky as it gets, here is this.
In 19, is there any doubt in your mind whether they purposely released or inadvertently came from the lab that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and Xi wanted to do to make sure that Donald Trump was not reelected president?
Well, there's always a little doubt. You can't just say definitely. A lot of people think that was true because I was charging them hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes and tariffs.
In a phase one deal, not for what phase two. Remember, in 19, is there any doubt?
So you understand, right? The conspiracy theory. China created COVID to unleash on the world, to kill millions of people across the country, including people in their country, to hurt Trump's chances in the next election because of his tariffs. Which Trump is so confused about his own tariffs, which is very sad. He's been confused for a very long time. He keeps saying that China paid a bunch of money because of his tariffs. That is just not accurate at all and reveals his own lack of knowledge when it comes to how these tariffs work. This is from Reuters. U.S. President Donald Trump says China pays the tariffs he has imposed on $250 billion of Chinese exports to the United States, but that's not how tariffs work. China's government and companies in China do not pay tariffs directly. Tariffs are a tax on imports. They are paid by U.S. registered firms to U.S. customs for the goods they import into the United States. Importers often pass the cost of tariffs on to customers, manufacturers, and consumers in the United States by raising their prices. U.S. business executives and economists say U.S. consumers foot much of the bill through rising prices. So then I guess the conspiracy theory has to be with those facts in mind, that the tariffs that Americans are having to pay is the reason that China attacked the world with COVID. But even if that were the case, which obviously is not, that's a Looney Tunes conspiracy theory, but let's just say that it were, that would be a terrible way on the part of China to hurt a leader's re-election bid, when oftentimes crises help leaders win re-election. If Trump had just partially taken the pandemic seriously and portrayed himself as a concerned leader leading effectively during a national and global crisis, he could have soared to re-election as other world leaders did in the same situation. So even that would be a bizarre strategy, unless Trump is admitting that China would just assume, as everyone would, that he would terribly mishandle the pandemic, definitely, and thus lose re-election. My goodness. Next moment, he says this about Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, don't forget, I had a very good relationship with Putin. He would have never gone into vice president in a million years. And even the Democrats, they did a poll the other day, 94% say if Trump was president, you wouldn't have that horrible catastrophe. And so many people are being killed, many more than they report. When they blow up a city, Steve, and you see all those big buildings, and then they say two people were injured, it's much worse than anybody understands. I would have that settled in 24 hours. It would be 24 hours. It would be.
So obviously, I don't know what he's talking about with the 94% Democrats poll, but I do want to address the talking point he constantly puts out there, that this never would have happened if he were still president and he could end it in a day. He's yet to, as we've talked about in the past, explain the specifics as to what he would have done differently than Biden to prevent Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or provide specifics as to what he would do differently now or when he got into office to end, compared to what Biden's doing now, to end Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But setting aside the hypothetical that he hasn't provided any explanation for as to how he would magically end it in 24 hours, I do want to talk about the "it never would have happened" thing. Again, I don't know at all. None of us can have any idea if that's the case. But let's say that it was true, okay? The only reason that would be true actually reflects incredibly poorly on Trump. And here's why. If Putin wanted to strategically wait to invade Ukraine until after Trump was president, which invading was obviously something he was eventually going to do, even Trump admits he's talked with Putin about Putin's ambition to do so. But even if he was going to wait until big, strong Trump wasn't president anymore, it would very likely be because Trump was breaking down the very Western alliances that would help to defend Ukraine. So why invade now when he could wait for Trump to do more damage to the US's relationships with our allies, NATO, and then when the opposition is less united, invade then. As a reminder, here's this from The Independent. Donald Trump was considering pulling out of NATO and cutting the US's alliance with South Korea if he won the 2020 election, according to an account of his private meetings with top aides. If Putin expected that Trump was going to eventually pull the United States out of NATO, which would cause NATO to be unbelievably weaker, then why wouldn't he wait for that to happen before invading Ukraine? Because we've seen how much a united NATO with the leadership of the United States can provide in support and aid now that Russia actually has invaded Ukraine. So a broken NATO would be Putin's ideal situation before invading Ukraine. But once he saw that Trump was out and wouldn't have a chance to do that, well, then the invasion had to happen anyways. Now, again, I'm not saying that's the reason for the timing of Putin's invasion. There are so many factors. It's very likely not all centered around the United States. But if you, as a MAGA supporter, or Trump himself, want to say this invasion didn't happen during his presidency because of him, the only conceivable situation in which that is the case, based on the facts, actually makes Trump look horrible. The only situation in which that is at all plausible paints Trump as a weak leader who was actively breaking down the very alliance that is now assisting in Ukraine's stunning defense of themselves. And yeah, you know, now that I think about it, maybe I can imagine that Putin may have wanted to wait to see just how much damage Trump was going to do to these global relationships before he invaded Ukraine. I guess that could have been what played a role in his decision. And we can have that conversation if you want to, MAGA, but I'm guessing you probably don't. Next moment from this interview.
He said the head of the Taliban is smart. He said, they asked me about President Xi. I said, no, he's at the top of his game. He's a brilliant guy, controls 1.4 billion people. Like, you know,
and really controls.
And then if I say, very smart, he's a very smart man, the press goes, he called him smart. Do you understand? Yeah, he's smart. He said.
And there it is again. As I will always say, by the way, when I criticize Trump for moments like this, it's not because you can't recognize a bad person as intelligent. You 100% can. It's because Trump is obsessed. If you're a regular viewer of this show, you know that it seems almost every interview he has to say, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un, smart, 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 smart. Oh, they're so smart. Why is that always on his mind? Because of what he said there. Xi has complete control over billions of people. And in Trump's mind, that's awesome. He wishes he could have that power. So being able to acquire it makes him need to gush over that person's intelligence. Next moment, he has another incoherent meltdown over his indictment.
District attorney who's after me doesn't prosecute murderers. They don't prosecute anything. People are dying in prisons from bed bugs. You saw that where the guy was eaten alive by bed bugs. They're not doing anything having to do with murder. Same thing in New York. The DA Bragg, who went after me and is being soundly criticized because I did nothing wrong. In fact, if you read the so-called indictment, we did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong.
His press conference.
People are saying, you look at Greg Jarrett, you look at Andy McCarthy, you look
Mike
at any one of them, Mike Davis, any one of them. You take a look at them. These are nobody on my side. But what they say is this is the worst indictment.
So knowing all that,
I mean, Jonathan Turley wrote one the other day, which was unbelievable.
It's a joke. It's a joke. Remember, he didn't even list the charges at the press conference.
No, there's no crime. They're saying, but there's no crime. Nobody's ever, even Democrats are saying this is horrible. But
yeah, I don't know what Democrats are saying that, but he keeps repeating, no crime, no crime, no crime. I think you're being accused of 34 felony crimes, sir, or felony counts. And the crime is falsifying business records. Interestingly, you heard him allude to the talking point, and I want to focus in because we've gone over his normal little rant there multiple times in multiple interviews. But an interesting element of this, also something we've touched on, but not as much. The talking point we've heard from a lot of people on the right about his indictment. Why is Alvin Bragg prosecuting Trump when everyone is being murdered in New York City? Which, number one, just simply, are you saying then that the presence of violent crime means we shouldn't prosecute white-collar crimes? No. But second, fascinating that if they're actually concerned about murder, they never seem to talk about the fact that red states that voted for Trump in 2020 see a 40% higher murder rate than blue states that voted for Joe Biden in 2020. 40%. So while blue areas, heck yeah, have problems and those need to be addressed, before you talk one bit about them, Trump, sorry, my voice cut out there. You should talk with your own side about why states run by people with your ideology have such a disproportionate problem with homicide rates. Not to say all sorts of different areas don't have issues. Again, they do, and that matters everywhere. But this whole talking point is so disingenuous when they bring it up because they never seem to care about the problems, often much more severe in areas that vote for them. Final moment we will look at here.
They've weaponized, you would know this very well, they've weaponized the Justice Department, they've weaponized the FBI. They're doing things that a communist country would do, a Marxist country would do. It's a very sad
Did you
thing.
ever think this country would get to that?
I never thought it would be that bad.
And you
Don't
dealt with
forget-
some tough people.
Yeah, I said, we will never have a socialist country. And I was right. We skipped that station. We went right into Marxism or communism. What's going on is sick. And what they do is they're unbelievable at cheating on elections. With you, I don't have to worry about saying that because, you know, if you say that on Fox, they want to cut you out. They cheated on elections. Had Rupert Murdoch backed his people, he wouldn't have had any liability. When he went out and said there was nothing wrong with this election, what a thing to say. I mean...
What a thing to say, the truth. So this was the legal strategy Trump has repeated multiple times for Fox News during the Dominion defamation lawsuit against them. Hey, you know how you're in a bunch of legal trouble because you lied about the election and you knew you were lying as exposed by the private text messages? Yeah. During the trial, you should just go in there and say, nah, the election actually was stolen, even though there isn't any evidence. That would have gone very well for Fox News.